Reddick here. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for allowing me to do the 2D and 3D analysis of your swing. I'm going to go through 12 hitting inhibitors that can impact your power, contact, and your efficiency. Then we'll also look at some 3D kinematic sequence there. All right, so I'm going to take you through the list. So first thing we do is we look at your negative move, meaning movement away from the body. And I guess all day I've been starting the video late. So you have a little bit negative move there. And what we want or don't want is for that knee to go too far out to the side there. Let me zoom here a little bit. Sorry, getting a little happy with the pointer. All right, and so if we draw a line, sometimes we'll do it on the outside of the ankle, a little bit of the foot, and so we want to make sure that knee doesn't cross that line there. We'll look on your 3D here in a second just to see how much of a negative move you have. Really, if your foot starts out slightly turned, technically I could just move this line a little bit and just say, hey, as long as you don't go too far out. Because this I did start to camera late on here. Right now I'm going to say you do not have a sway. Next thing we look for, excuse me, is loss of posture. So as you go into your negative move and start moving forward, what I do is I draw a line from your right eye to your waist. And we want to make sure there's a forward lean there. And as you can see, there's a bit of a back lean, kind of get you to toe touch here to here, 85, but you're leaning left. And we don't want you leaning left until you get to heel plant, all right? So just kind of think of it, we want you in an attacking posture, negative move as you go to toe touch and then reverse. So these lines are a little bit exaggerated, but I just want to give you an idea of what I'm looking for on this move. And so we call that loss of posture, and that loss of posture can impact your sequencing and your overall swing efficiency and power. Next thing we look for is what we refer to as dead hands. This is an important move as we go from the negative move to the bat. And so here, it's a little tricky because you got a pretty good shoulder turn. But typically what we'll do is we'll draw a line between your nose and kind of mid hands. And then I'll take you all the way down to toe touch. We'll say, boop. And then what I do is I draw another line between your hands and your nose. And you can see there is a separation there. And so I would say you do not have dead hands based off of how we measure it, but in reality what's happening, instead of you pushing your hands out, it's more of a rotation of your shoulders, and so there may not be a true extension. Let me look at that a few more times before I make that call. No, there's your left elbow is straightening a little bit. Okay, so I won't call that dead hands at all. Next thing we're looking for is loss of base. So I want to see what that left knee, if that kneecap is looking at me when you touch there. All right, and you can see once you get to that toe tap, that left knee kind of still looking at the camera, still looking at the camera, still looking at the camera. Then it finally wants to turn. So we look for, your base, how firm you are at the toe touch position. And so we would say you actually have a bit of a loss of base here. And that's important in weight shift and as well as sequencing. Next thing we look for is hanging back. So what I do is I draw a line just along your back foot here. I'm going to do it here. And then we want to make sure your weight is shifting forward. And so what we'll see, if any of that foot goes behind the line, and even if I move the line here, is that really 90 degrees? If I move it here, like I even give you a little room, and you see how that foot goes behind, and your foot's not really slipping. I know you're kind of pivoting on that toe, and ideally what we want you to see is you up on that toe, that right foot, kind of like the golfers when they go through a follow through. We want your foot on that toe rather than it being flexed. So based off of this, it is showing that you're hanging back. And so that could be a sign that you're not appropriately shifting your weight. So your weight should be going towards the ball, the pitcher. Really, your lower body weight should be going towards there. Really, your whole body. All right. So we do have what we refer to as hanging back. Next thing I'm looking for is I want to make sure that elbow doesn't get stuck on the hip. All right. So have you go through. All right. So we call that a gate swing, or we don't want you to have a gate swing, but you're getting past your hip there. So that's good. Next thing we look for is flying elbows. So we take it out to toe touch. We'll make sure that elbow's inside. It'll take you a few more frames. You're not pushing, you're whipping through, which is excellent. You also want to make sure you're not dumping the barrel. So we want the bat in front of the hands. Once you get to that toe touch position, actually heel plant position, I'm going to draw a line straight up and down here. And we want to make sure you're rotating around that line there. Good. And actually, you can see you come off the line a little bit. And some of that is related to your weight here when we talked about the hanging back. And so this particular characteristic I'm looking for is to make sure you don't slide too much that way. But we can also see, and again, I'm being a little picky here, but I think you come off the line a little bit, and most people will rotate. You can definitely see it there. See how you come off the line? And I suspect that's because your weight is hanging back. All right, and we want that weight going forward. All right, and so I'm going to switch to the rear view. And it's this one here. And zoom, zoom, zoom. We're going to have you go kind of positive move. And it really kind of depends on where I draw this line and when. So 90 degrees, I really don't want you coming off that line. And you can see you come off that, actually, just until contact, excuse me. So you do come off the line there, all right? That means your hips are going forward. And what you do is you create a smaller space for your hands. So if someone, if the pitcher threw it inside and tried to jam you, by your hips going forward, you give your hands less space to maneuver, all right? Next thing we look for from toe touch to heel plant, we want to make sure that lead hand is inside the elbow and you aren't throwing out your hands there, what we call casting. So you're doing just fine. Toe touch, heel plant. Toe touch, heel plant. That hands are inside the elbow, all right? I'm going to switch over to the 3D analysis. And what we're looking for here is your X factor, just how much, this bottom left here, the green, just how much your thoracic, your pelvis and shoulders separate. And remember, we want to create a coil, and within that coil, it creates power. And so looking at kind of where you start and where you end, you get about 22 degrees. Ideally, we want you at least 25. Most people, I won't say most people, but a lot of the top hitters are between 25 and 35 degrees. So we do want to work on improving that X factor. And looking at your movement screen, you did well with thoracic rotation, but the pelvic rotation, you were a little bit limited. So if we can increase that hip mobility, that'll help out a lot in regards to improving your X factor. You did have a little shoulder tightness that could be impacting the velocity of your throws, but it can also impact your hitting. So if we look at this top left here, this is your kinematic sequence. And what we're looking for is just to see if you're sequencing properly within your hips, your thorax or shoulder, and your lead arm. So the red is your lead arm. The orange is your pelvis, and the green is the I forgot what the green is the thorax and the shoulder. So if you look here, if the sequencing we want is orange, green, and red, meaning that we want them to peak. We want the orange to peak first, then the green, then the red. But as you can see here, your red peaks first. So that means your arms are getting ahead of your body. And so we actually want you firing first from the hips, the orange. That transfers power to the green, which transfers power to the red. And so when you don't have that sequencing, kind of think of it as a power leak, or oil leak. It's like, all right, you're not getting all of it. And even though you have these increases, you can see here on the red, it's not as high as it should be. And so even though it is firing first, you're not getting a good transfer. So sometimes just by getting good transfer of energy, we're going to be able to increase your swing speed, but it all starts in the hip. And so on your physical screen, again, we got to really work on getting those hips to move, getting those hips to fire. So doing those corrective exercises is going to be very important. And then I think once we get your hips going, I think you'll be able to fall into line pretty good. You do have a little shoulder tightness, and what we're seeing in a lot of folks, that not all of them, but some people with significant shoulder findings, they just kind of naturally fire with their upper body first rather than their lower body. And I think that's the brain realizing that, hey, I just don't have that range of motion, so I'm going to generate a lot of power, but what it does, it takes over the sequencing there. But definitely something that we can address, and be good about doing those corrective exercises, and then we'll see you in a couple of weeks for a reevaluation. All right, keep me posted. Take care.